Imagine dedicating like 50 years of your life to the deepest, most esoteric, mystical traditions on Earth.
Right. Just half a century of intense focus.
Yeah, exactly. You master the complex techniques, you learn the ancient texts, you do all this grueling inner work, and then you turn around and tell the modern world that joining a spiritual organization is, well, a complete waste of time.
It is definitely a massive pivot. I mean, usually when you learn a new skill today, like coding or picking up some Italian before a vacation, it's very transactional.
Oh, totally. You don't swear a lifelong oath of unwavering devotion to your language app. You just use the software, grab the knowledge, and move on.
Exactly. But historically, if you stepped into the realm of the spiritual, if you wanted to understand your own consciousness, that lifelong oath of loyalty was the absolute bare minimum expectation.
You find a master, you get initiated, and you just surrender completely to their rules. But today we are doing a custom-tailored deep dive for you, the listener, into a source that aggressively shatters that centuries-old expectation.
We really are. We're looking at a fascinating, highly unconventional video presentation from Osman, who introduces himself as the blind Muslim yogi.
And his background alone makes him an incredibly compelling subject to analyze. He operates right at the intersection of some vastly different worlds.
He really does. I mean, he presents himself as an advanced level yoga and meditation teacher with 50 years of dedicated practice under his belt.
Wow, 50 years.
Yeah, and he makes a huge point of noting that he has been teaching for free for 46 of those 50 years.
Mm.
So that massive amount of experiential data gives him this highly unique vantage point.
Right, he isn't just an armchair philosopher. He operates as a bioenergy healer, claiming a master level with telepathic healing capabilities.
Which is wild. And he specifically notes specializing in critical care and terminal illnesses, especially cases where conventional medical science has completely failed.
Yeah.
He actually cites a success rate of over 90%.
So this is a figure who operates deep within the mystical, esoteric traditions, fully immersed in the unexplainable. And knowing that deep mystical background makes the mission of our deep dive today so intriguing.
Definitely.
We are setting out to explore Hashi's highly controversial central thesis. He argues that in our modern, tech-driven era, what he explicitly calls the woke community of the 21st century, formal initiation into traditional spiritual orders is entirely unnecessary.
He basically sees it as an outdated, archaic model that holds people back.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because his definition of what it means to be a modern spiritual seeker starts in the most unlikely of places.
Yeah, with a rigorous, borderline, obsessive skepticism toward artificial intelligence.
Right. And his framing of the modern seeker is incredibly unique here. He argues that we are an advanced community now, rapidly approaching the year 2026, and our collective consciousness has just evolved past the need to be bound by heavy obligatory rules.
And to illustrate this shift, he shares this surprisingly grounded story about his 11-year-old daughter. He actually credits her with teaching him the true foundational meaning of the word woke.
And we should clarify, in his framework, it has absolutely nothing to do with modern political discourse. It is entirely about cognitive awakening and critical thinking.
Exactly. So he had been encouraging his daughter to use an AI tool, Gemini, specifically to help with her schoolwork and learn a new language.
Right, he was looking at this tech, marveling at the sheer volume of data it could process, viewing it as this, like, ultimate infallible oracle of the modern age.
Yeah, and his 11-year-old daughter just looks at him and asks a very simple, profoundly disruptive question. She says, "But do you believe them?"
Oh, wow. I love that. Out of the mouths of babes, right?
Truly.
Uh,
And that single question just completely stopped him in his tracks. It forced him to step back and ask himself why he was granting this machine unearned authority.
And he didn't just ponder it philosophically either. He spent the next 2 months conducting a rigorous investigation into various AI platforms.
Yeah, actively cross-referencing their outputs with esoteric and historical knowledge he absolutely guaranteed knew to be true from his own 50 decades of intense study.
And he finds massive discrepancies, right? The AI gives him fundamentally wrong answers about complex subjects.
Right. And this seemingly mundane tech experiment leads to his grand epiphany. If we cannot afford to have blind faith in the ultimate supercomputers of the 21st century machines designed to aggregate all human knowledge, Why on earth would we maintain blind faith in a traditional spiritual organization run by fallible humans?
That makes a lot of sense. It's like signing up for a traditional spiritual order today with all its dogmas and mandatory rituals feels a bit like paying for one of those massive, incredibly restrictive cable TV bundles from the 1990s.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right. You are locked into a contract. You have to take 100 channels you have absolutely no interest in just to get the one documentary channel you actually want. And you're forced to consume it on their arbitrary schedule.
Yeah, Hashi is essentially looking at the modern landscape and saying, hey, we live in the streaming era now. Go find exactly the content you need, extract the value, and do it entirely on your own terms. What's fascinating here is he's actively equating modern technological literacy with spiritual self-reliance.
Because in an age of absolute information overload, where we're bombarded with competing truth claims every second, he is presenting the act of questioning authority as the very first true step of modern spirituality.
Exactly. Whether that authority is a Silicon Valley chatbot or a revered guru sitting on a cushion, the psychological muscle required to investigate them is the same.
But, I mean, I do think we need to push back on that premise just a bit, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is a healthy, pragmatic skepticism of a generative language model really utilizing the exact same psychological mechanism that is required for a profound spiritual awakening?
That's a fair question.
Because one is fundamentally an act of fact-checking external data to ensure accuracy. The other, at least in the traditional models we are familiar with, is about the complete dissolution and surrender of the ego. They seem like opposite motions of the mind.
Yeah, and that tension you're pointing out is the very core of why his teachings are so controversial among traditionalists. For thousands of years, the established mechanism of spiritual growth has been surrender. You empty your cup so the master can fill it.
Right. But for Hashi, investigation, verification, and relentless questioning are the new mechanisms of growth.
Exactly. He is arguing that the 21st century seeker's environment demands inquiry, not obedience. We are hardwired now to verify. So forcing a modern mind into an ancient posture of unquestioning submission is not just inefficient, it's intellectually dishonest.
Okay, so if we follow that logic, it naturally forces us to reevaluate the entire hierarchy. If we dismantle the traditional institution, what happens to the individual sitting at the absolute top of that pyramid?
They undergo a massive reclassification. Hashi aggressively deconstructs the concept of the Sadguru, which in many Eastern traditions is viewed as the ultimate supreme teacher.
Right, usually positioned as a godlike figure who has achieved total enlightenment and inherently possesses absolute knowledge about everything.
Yeah, and Hashi flat out states that this person does not exist. No human embodies the entirety of universal knowledge. Instead, he redefines a guru simply as a teacher who possesses a highly specific experiential level in one particular pathway.
And he backs that up by pointing out just how fractured and specialized these esoteric pathways actually are. He notes that within just one major school of thought, the Shaiva school under Kashmir Shaivism, there are over 112 distinct, highly specific yoga pathways.
Right, and he isn't just dropping that number as trivia. The reason there are 112 pathways is that human psychology and physiology are wildly diverse.
A meditative technique that liberates a highly analytical mind might cause massive psychological distress for someone who is deeply emotionally driven.
Exactly. He mentions other vast systems too, like Shaktism, Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Advaita. He specifically points out that Advaita doesn't even rely on a personal God concept to begin with. It focuses instead on a reality beyond the mind entirely, very similar to Buddhism or Sankhya philosophy.
The spiritual landscape is simply too vast, too intricate, and too dependent on individual psychology for any single human being to master entirely. Because of this, Hashi compares a guru to a mixed martial arts coach, or a wrestling teacher, or a boxing coach.
Right, you go to them for a very specific skill set.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The analogy he used that really crystallized this for me was comparing a guru to a university professor with a PhD.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to frame it.
You seek out a university professor because they have spent decades acquiring deep, specialized knowledge in one field, like organic chemistry. You don't walk into your chemistry professor's office expecting them to explain the absolute meaning of life.
No, definitely not.
And you don't expect them to manage your personal relationships. And you certainly don't worship them as a divine entity. You extract their specialized knowledge, apply it, and graduate. Hashi's ultimate conclusion here is a radical restructuring of authority. He says, your real guru is you.
Yeah, he is advocating for a deeply utilitarian approach to spiritual mentorship. You seek out the master of breathwork to learn breathwork. You seek out the master of meditation to learn focus. But you never hand over the keys to your sovereign consciousness.
But wait, if we view a guru purely as a specialized personal trainer for your soul, you hire them, they teach you a technique, the session ends, and you go back to normal life. We don't build an altar to our personal trainers.
Hopefully not.
Right. But if we completely strip away all that deep reverence, all that ancient mysticism, and treat spiritual masters literally just like we treat a boxing coach, do we risk losing the profound psychological respect that might actually be a prerequisite to learning the deepest lessons?
That is a highly valid critique of his model. Traditionalists would argue that reverence is the very solvent that breaks down the ego's defenses.
Right. Isn't there a psychological threshold where reverence opens the mind to subtle realities in a way a purely transactional relationship simply cannot?
Absolutely. But we have to look at what Hashi is actively trying to prevent
Mm-hmm.
by stripping away that godlike mystique. Historically, positioning a human being as an infallible divine entity has been the primary mechanism for horrific exploitation, both financial and psychological.
Oh, for sure. We've all seen the documentaries.
Right. By dragging the guru down from the celestial pedestal and placing them squarely in the realm of specialized coaching, he is democratizing the knowledge. He is arguing that the cosmic secrets are now out in the open.
Available to be studied independently, verified experientially, and utilized by anyone with the willpower to look. But if the master is simply a specialized coach and not a divine gatekeeper who actually turns on the power source,
That is the big question.
historically, unlocking that profound mystical energy, what many traditions call the kundalini, required a highly guarded formal process. It required diksha, which is formal initiation, or shaktipat, the literal energetic transmission from the guru.
Right. The guru touches your forehead and suddenly your internal energy grid is illuminated. And Hashi doesn't deny that this phenomenon exists at all.
Oh, he doesn't.
No, he acknowledges that Shaktipat is real. He admits it sounds incredible, this idea of instant energetic transmission.
Ah,
But he entirely rejects the prevailing dogma that this transmission is the only way, or even the necessary way, to achieve that awakening.
so he believes you can generate that exact same energy completely on your own, for free.
Exactly. Without ever kneeling before a master or submitting to their organization's rules. He claims that every day, intense focus naturally awakens this exact same biological and spiritual mechanism.
He lists things like going to the gym and pushing your physical limits, studying a complex subject intensely, deep introspection. He essentially equates the legendary Kundalini awakening to the modern psychological concept of entering a flow state.
Yeah, Hashi operates on a bioenergetic premise that attention is, quite literally, energy. When you withdraw your scattered awareness from external distractions and funnel your entire life force into a singular point of concentration, you're using the exact same internal circuitry that ancient yogis utilize in meditation caves.
He is taking the esoteric concept of a coiled serpent energy resting at the base of the spine and mapping it directly onto the neurological state of deep, uninterrupted human concentration. But he warns that we have deeply misunderstood the scale of this energy, too.
Oh, absolutely. He points out that the popular mythological idea of a human suddenly holding the full level of cosmic energy is biological nonsense.
Right, the full level is the explosive power of the entire cosmos. A fragile human nervous system would be instantly obliterated by that. It has to be grown and cultivated in tiny incremental steps.
In fact, he notes that sometimes this energy can arrive in a high power mode and cause severe adverse physical or psychological effects, simply because a person has been unknowingly awakening it through years of intense thought without understanding what they were triggering.
It's a radical reframing of human potential. He is erasing the boundary between the secular and the sacred. It feels very much like jump-starting a car engine yourself instead of sitting on the side of the road waiting for roadside assistance.
That's a great way to look at it.
You already have the jumper cables, your own mine. You just have to figure out how to connect them properly. But I have to pause and genuinely question the scale of this claim.
Okay, what's your hesitation?
Is Hashi really truly suggesting that the feeling of timelessness I get when I am intensely focused on writing a complex email, or the zone a painter enters, is fundamentally the exact same cosmic energy as a legendary yogic awakening?
Yes. Fundamentally, he is arguing it is the exact same current, just operating at a different voltage. By stating that mundane focus is biologically and spiritually identical to mystical awakening, he is validating your everyday passions.
So my writing or coding isn't a secular distraction from the spiritual path. It is the path.
Exactly. He is completely removing the barrier to entry for enlightenment.
Okay, but once you have jump-started that internal energy through your own flow states, you still need a steering wheel. You need a way to direct that energy if you aren't following the rigid map provided by a traditional path.
Right. And this brings us to Hashi's perspective on traditional spiritual tools, specifically ancient mantras and the concept of deities.
His view on this is incredibly mechanical. It reads almost like a computer programming manual rather than a theological text.
It really does. Most people understand mantras as sacred chants, essentially poetic prayers directed outward to specific gods, begging for favor or protection. But Hashi completely upends this.
He states emphatically that mantras are not prayers to literal external gods sitting in the clouds, they are formulas. He uses the analogy of a weaving machine, which is such a tactile, functional way to look at mysticism.
Yeah, when you sit down and repeat a mantra, you're not begging an external deity for a wish. You are sitting at a loom, operating a machine to create a piece of cloth. Through the acoustic repetition of these specific formulas, you are creating or inviting a very specific type of resonant energy into your localized space.
He refers to these energetic creations as divas, describing them as luminous, effulgent beings constructed of light. But the critical distinction is that you are formulating them yourself. You are building an energetic structure through acoustic repetition, much like a 3D printer layers material.
Right, and once formulated, he claims you can converse with them. And the comparison he uses is highly telling. He compares speaking to a diva to speaking to an AI.
That is such a wild conceptual leap.
Yeah.
It's as if he views a traditional mantra as entering a very specific programming prompt into a cosmic user interface.
Input the correct acoustic code, and the universe renders a localized hologram of light. It is an aggressively functionalist view.
Right.
And because he views all these ancient rituals simply as open-source tools, Hashi aggressively encourages the modern seeker to become radically pluralistic.
Right. If the tools are just tools, there is no need for brand loyalty. He argues that you shouldn't restrict yourself to the toolkit of one single system. You need to gather data and techniques from everywhere.
He explicitly mentions studying the philosophies of the Far East, the Middle East, Western esoteric traditions, Greek philosophy, Native American rituals, and the Aboriginal cultures of Australia.
He views the entire sum of human spiritual history as a giant hardware store, and you are expected to walk the aisles and build your own custom toolkit. But he takes this empirical approach to an extreme that I think will genuinely shock some listeners who are accustomed to Western materialism.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
He casually brings up the topic of spirits.
Yeah. He says that if you are a modern skeptic and you don't believe in the existence of spirits, you shouldn't just sit in a coffee shop debating it philosophically. He suggests you book a flight to Indonesia, where dealing with these entities is an integrated part of the culture, and actually purchase a spirit trapped in a bottle so you can test it for yourself.
Which is, well, this raises an important question about what words like science and investigation actually mean to someone operating within Hashi's paradigm.
Because to a Western materialist mindset, science is strictly confined to laboratory conditions, double-blind studies, and measurable physical phenomena.
Right. But for a mystic like Hashi, science means gathering firsthand, experiential data, regardless of how bizarre or terrifying that data appears to our conditioned sensibilities.
So to his mind, opening a bottled spirit in Indonesia to see what physically manifests in the room is applying the scientific method. It is a direct empirical test.
Precisely. It is an empirical test run within a fundamentally mystical framework. He is constantly reiterating, do not take my word for it. Do not take an ancient guru's word for it. But equally, do not arrogantly dismiss these phenomena just because you haven't personally seen them yet. Go run the experiment yourself.
That perfectly encapsulates his core message. True understanding only comes from gathering diverse tools and experiences directly, rather than pledging blind allegiance to any single worldview.
It's important to note here, though, just to provide a fully transparent picture, that while he aggressively advocates for this free, anti-institutional method.
And he does offer his own foundational yoga program totally for free online, right?
Right. He does, but he still functions within a specialized economy. He explicitly mentions that if someone comes to him wanting him to unblock their chakras or heal a terminal illness using his unique bioenergy protocol, he charges for that specialized service.
Which honestly tracks perfectly with his whole guru as a specialized professor of philosophy. If he is the highly specialized personal trainer, you are welcome to work out at home for free using his published routines.
Exactly. But if you want to hire him for a private session to fix a complex problem in your energy grid, you pay the specialist for their time. It's highly practical and devoid of the usual spiritual guilt.
So, what does this all mean? If we pull all of these disparate threads together for you, the listener, Osman Hashi is essentially challenging every single one of us to step up and become the active, uncompromising CEOs of our own spiritual journeys.
We are being tasked with permanently firing the romantic idea of the ultimate all-knowing savior. We are being told to treat gurus as temporary, highly specialized coaches.
And we're being asked to fundamentally re examine our relationship with the sacred, to see ancient mantras not as submissive prayers, but as acoustic machinery and programmable code that we have the authority to operate.
We are challenged to look at our everyday passions, the intense focus we bring to our work, and recognize that flow state as the biological fuel for our spiritual awakening. We do not need a master's permission to turn the power on.
And finally, we are pushed to reject the safety of the monolithic institution and instead piece together a custom-built, rigorously tested worldview drawn from the wisdom of the entire globe.
It is a deeply empowering, highly individualized vision for the modern era. But navigating spirituality without a map does leave us with a final, lingering question to consider before we wrap up.
Let's hear it.
If we begin to treat every spiritual path, every ancient sacred ritual, and every diverse cultural practice merely as a modular tool or a convenient hack that we can download, experiment with, and discard the moment it stops serving our immediate desires, do we risk permanently losing the profound transformative value of true patience, surrender, and long-term commitment?
That is a brilliant counterweight to his philosophy.
Because those ancient traditions were built on the premise that the ego must be worn down over time. Can you truly master the deepest, most difficult parts of yourself if you are always acting as the ultimate, unquestioned authority in the room?
Yeah, if you only ever open a language app when you feel a burst of motivation and you immediately close it the second the grammar gets difficult or boring, you're never actually going to achieve fluency.
Exactly. You might learn enough vocabulary to order a cup of coffee in Rome, but you will never be able to write poetry in the language.
Hashi's model is total freedom, but it places the entire crushing burden of discipline squarely on your own shoulders. You have to be your own master. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning everything, keep investigating your own sources, and we will see you next time.